In this review, we're going to revisit the very popular competition from Magnaflow here, talk about the sound, the materials, the construction, and price, of course, and then we're going to wrap it all up with the installation. And right on the surface, catbacks for the S550 GT, very straightforward, no cutting, no permanent modification, and that is the case with the Magnaflow. 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, but I will expand on that later in the video. So on the surface, the Magnaflow competition should appeal to the S550 GT owners out there looking to go with a moderately aggressive system for their ride, but one that's not going to be completely over the top like your Corsa Extremes or your Flowmaster Outlaws. Now, in addition to that, it's also going to be a great choice for the guys looking for a solid build and solid materials with their Cat-Back exhaust system. But most importantly here, the biggest differentiating factor with this particular Cat-Back is of course going to be the very unique carbon fiber tips, adding a baller look to the Cat-Back, no doubt, but also adding a lot to the final price tag. In fact, you're looking at just over 300 bucks to add these to your standard Magnaflow competition. So the competition is one of a couple offerings from Magnaflow, your other choice being the Street, of course, and as you might expect, the competition will be the louder of the two. But as I pointed out earlier here, gang, this is not gonna be as loud as some of your other category screamers, such as those Extremes, Outlaws, or even your Borla Attack. So breaking out my Wake the Neighbors, strong 3 out of 5 here on my 1 to 5 or 1 to Wake the Neighbors scale. Maybe even creeping into a 4, but I think the strong 3 is just the perfect way to sum this thing up. Now, obviously that's with the factory manifold still in place. Ditch those things in favor of a set of your favorite long tube headers, and of course that number will peg the scales. Now you do hear this thing a little bit below 2,000 RPM when cruising on the highway, but don't let that scare you away, as it certainly isn't unbearable. And honestly, the tone really isn't nothing new here, right guys? I mean, the competition from Magnaflow is one of the very first systems I reviewed when the S550 started dropping, and as such, this thing's been around a little bit. There's a lot of customer feedback on the site, so check that out for yourself. There's 30 plus 5-star reviews on this particular system, and it might be a great way to help you make your own decision when it comes to buying. But let's get down to some of the nitty-gritty here, and a lot of this is going to seem familiar because it's all pretty much the same with the competition, with the exception of the tips, of course, which I'll get to in a minute. So on the surface, here's what you're looking at. 3-inch mandrel-bent tubing, full stainless steel construction throughout, guys, 409 grade to be exact. Everything's covered by the Magnaflow lifetime warranty. You're getting a standard or traditional X-style crossover pipe, and everything's gonna exit out of the competition series mufflers straight through by design. But from here is where things get a little bit different and a lot more expensive. You are looking at the carbon fiber tips. They're done very well. They're the real deal. They're held on by some rivets, which actually are functional. They're not for just dress up or whatever you want to call it. And it's done in more of a dry carbon. There's not a polished resin on there. I think it looks really good. It does add to the price, as I pointed out earlier, guys. You're looking at a $1,500 plus Cat-Back exhaust system, making it one of the most expensive Cat-Backs without a quad tip configuration. So again, standard competition, you're adding roughly 300 bucks on top of that to grab these very baller tips. Don't get me wrong, they look great, but you have to determine if that's gonna be worth it to you. All right, so we've talked sound, we've talked construction materials, and of course we've talked about the price. What about the installation? And I'm just gonna cover some of the bigger details with the install, but on the surface, again, 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, maybe an hour or 2 in the garage or shop from start to finish before you're making some noise. S550 Cat-Back exhaust systems are very straightforward, and that is the case here at the Magnaflow. There's no cutting, you don't have to deal with that solid rear axle like years past. The IRS makes things a complete breeze once you're underneath the car. So removing the factory exhaust system and installing a new Magnaflow can pretty much all be done with a basic socket set and a few other little tidbits around the garage. But again, 1 hour from start to finish, maybe 2 depending on your expertise, and a simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter before you're making some sweet sound. So the Magnaflow competition is a great system, one that's been around for the S550 ever since it was released, and as such, it has a ton of positive feedback when it comes to the overall sound. This particular version with the carbon fiber tips is unique, of course. They look really sharp when installed if you don't mind forking out the big money to get them. So that is my review of the Magnaflow competition, which you can find right here at AmericanMuscle.com.